All right, welcome in. Cube Show podcast, college football podcast that usually comes to you on Sundays, and we're back here on Sunday. Had a home game in the UFL this weekend. Panthers at Stallions. Stallions on a missed field goal as regulation runs out. Hang on to win that game, but Michigan led most of the game. We'll get it again next weekend if you're interested for a USFL divisional playoff game right here in Birmingham, 2 Central, ABC. Panther Stallions one more time. So be sure to check that one out. Live tackle football on your television. Turn the golf off. All right, so a couple of things that I want to get to today. TV times are leaking out for football games. I don't know a lot that we can make of this other than where some games are going to live as far as days. Our topic today is going to be rivalry games in the new Southeastern Conference. I think that we know what great rivalry games are nationally. We know what great rivalry games are in the SEC. But now we have a new SEC. So we're going to give you the top 5 rivalry games in the new Southeastern Conference. Unfortunately, we're going to see some movement in some of these games. We've seen some movement previously. Some of these rivalry games we haven't seen since 2011. Some we've seen on Thanksgiving Day, on Black Friday, on the weekend before Thanksgiving, on Thanksgiving weekend. We've seen them move around a little bit. And unfortunately, we've seen some of our rivalry games already be moved. We're not going to get the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving Day. Georgia Tech is going to be on Black Friday. So it's some of it we like, some of it we don't like. The time thing, we're seeing the flexibility with ABC, what that's going to be able to do. We've got a show coming next week on the SEC Network, not next week, but the week after. We'll talk about some of the windows and schedule release for the rest of the games for the rest of the season. And you're going to get an idea, 1 or 2 different time slots for at least every game moving forward. Some you'll already know in a concrete fashion where that game's going to live. So it's going to give you a better way to plan around and do different things. But you're already seeing the SEC loaded up on ABC, both at 11 a.m. and that traditional 2:30 slot where that's not going to be the best game every week anymore because you get more in prime time. SEC Network's still going to have 3 most weekends. Then you'll get ESPN, ESPN2. So they're going to be all over the place. But ABC going to have a lot of SEC games this upcoming season. We've already seen that just with a couple of weeks trickle out of how it's going to look and how it's going to be. You guys know each and every week we're brought to you by Wickles Pickles, wickedly delicious. We always have them here at the house, and I can speak specifically to this weekend as I had a home game. I had the TV crew, Drew Carter, Stormy, and Roger, a guy who works on our crew, came over and had dinner on Friday night. I had to bust out the Wickles Pickles. Big fans. They loved them. Had no idea what they were getting into. I will say there was maybe a sausage that was cooked and paired with the pickles that you can find at a county in South Alabama. But they don't sponsor the show, so we can't throw them out just yet. But they love both, and it was incredible. Appreciate them coming by the house. We had fun. But we appreciate Wickles Pickles, wickedly delicious. They sponsor the show. Get them in your local grocery store. If they don't have them, ask them why and tell them they need to get them there. So we know what restaurants they're at. You know what restaurants they're at. You know where you can get them. Wickles.com if you need them drop shipped, and they'll send them right to your door. So listen, we love Wickles Pickles. We sponsor them on the move whenever we can. All right, so let's get into rivalry games. And we're going to talk the new Southeastern Conference. I have made it clear multiple times on this show, Army-Navy is the greatest rivalry game in college football. I love the Iron Bowl, Ohio State, Michigan. The game is incredible. Civil War, fantastic. A lot of rivalry games we're going to talk about today. Some of the SEC, ACC rivalry games are incredible. Carolina, Clemson, Florida, Florida State, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Kentucky, Louisville. None of those are going to be in my top 5. However, Army-Navy is in a league of its own. And as we have stated before on the show, protect that thing at all costs, no matter what you need to do, because it is a mainstay in this sport that does not need to be effed with. That being said, there is one part of the Army-Navy game that bothers me a little bit, and that is where it's played. And now I think it's played in cool venues. I think it's pretty cool that it does travel and plays in different places so those people can be a part of it. But in my opinion, hardcore, true, the best rivalry games are played in each other's home stadiums. Now, doesn't mean that you have to have that. I just think it's one of the major qualifiers for being the best or the greatest most of the time. There are always going to be different things in different places that act different ways, and Army-Navy is that. So it's only even small minus that I would give the grade of the Army-Navy game. So we're going to go through the top 5 SEC rivalry games today in the new SEC. and we'll see what you think, and we'll give you a couple of reasons why we're going to go there. All right, so we've got other portal news that we're going to get to. Ole Miss had another big ad on the defensive line. Florida had a nice ad at wide receiver. A couple others we'll talk about in next week's show. We still have spring reviews for a couple of SEC teams that we're going to get to. But when I heard Chris Del Conte say this on the Paul Feinbaum show.
Have you been to the Red River Rivalry yet?
At the beginning of my career, I saw it.
It's ridiculous. It's the greatest thing ever. You may talk about the cocktail party, the Iron Bowl. It is nothing like
where
this
this is
game
going. I think
at the state fair, because you have 300,000 people.
I detected something there.
300,000 people outside. No, the Iron Bowl is awesome. Don't get me wrong. At night it's great. Same with but the cocktail party. But this game is nuts too.
I knew I had to have this discussion on the show because it's pretty apparent that some people don't know what they're getting into and don't have a full understanding of where things are as we stand here today. So I will start with this. Number 5 for me is going to be Oklahoma, Texas. I understand that the Red River shootout, Red River rivalry, I will say what I have to say via television, but it will always be the Red River shootout to me, is in a setting unlike any other that will be discussed on this show. I get it. The Texas State Fair. You can talk about how immaculate it is. And also, full disclosure, I've never been to this game. I would love to. I just want to go to the Texas State Fair in and of itself. Hell with the game, but I do want to go to the game also. Seeing that crimson and cream split right down the middle with the burnt orange, it's pretty awesome. It's incredible. You get a similar situation there in Jacksonville with Georgia, Florida. But we can't just say because you have a carnival around your game, that makes your game the best. There are rivalry games that we are going to mention here in a few minutes that don't need silverware, crystal plates, white tablecloths, fried butter or Oreos or corn dogs or paper mache clown cowboys to make it a great game or a great rivalry or a great event or a great setting. Those things can add to it, and congrats to you for having it. But it's not just going to push things to the forward or the top of the list for me. It just isn't. But I will put respect on this game because I know what it's meant recently, what it's meant in its totality. Now, 63, 51, and 5, Texas leads this series. Oklahoma, however, has won 11 of the last 15. Now, they also played this in the Big 12 title game, which is pretty incredible if you think about it. I mean, that year was pretty special for both teams. And the longest win streaks in this series, Oklahoma had a 6-win. Texas had an 8-win. There have been a lot of different factors with conference championships, as we just mentioned. National championships have been on the line recently in this game. So everything to make it big is there. The two teams being good, and it somewhat going back and forth. Historically, it has. Maybe not so much in the last 10 to 15 as you'd like it to, but it has done that over time. Big players making big plays. I mean, that Dylan Gabriel run last year is going to stick out forever. Roy Williams going Superman is one that we're always going to remember. But this is one that I think in its totality deserves to be thrown in with the new Southeastern Conference top 5 rivalry games. It's weird for me to say this. I get it. I know it, but I'm not going to ignore the scope of this game. I'm going to put the proper respect on it that it deserves and that it should get. And I'm going to put it into my list at 5 because I do think that there are a lot of other things that go into this game that maybe 1 or 2 that I'm going to leave out and people are going to be pissed off about it. And that's fine. That's okay. But it has a little bit more to it than maybe those do. So I'm willing to throw it out there. And whether it's Josh Pate, Greg McElroy, Dusty Dvorak, everyone who I've talked to that's been a part of this game has raved about how magnificent all of it is. The scope, the scale, the surroundings, every bit of it has been discussed as just immaculate. I would love to go one day. I don't believe that I will ever be on a crew on a high enough level to actually call this game. But maybe I'll get a chance to go sometime and check it out and see what it's all about. It's definitely on the bucket list. All right, so that comes in at number 5. Number 4 is going to be Alabama, Tennessee. There are certain things in certain rivalries that people look at and say that they remove themselves from being a part of great rivalries or even still a rivalry. When you get a game that has a 15-game win streak to one side, a lot of people say that subtracts it. I disagree. because when that other side does come back and win, just like Tennessee did in 2022, 52-49, and you see goalposts go into the Tennessee River and out of the stadium and how those fans reacted and how much that meant, it shows you just what kind of a rivalry game it really was and is. Now, this is the third Saturday in October. I know it has not necessarily always lived there in recent memory. 59, 39, and 7, it belongs to Alabama. It has been known for those streaks, though. One that you look back and say, Tennessee has won 7 straight. Alabama has an 11 and a 15-game win streak in this series. It almost felt like late 90s belonged to Tennessee. Recent memory has belonged to Alabama. The late 80s and 70s belonged to Alabama. Tennessee had a little bit of run before that. It's been very back and forth. So I don't think that we can just say that dominance on one side has allowed this rivalry to be extinguished, because it has bounced back multiple times and been dominant the other direction. But this is one that brings in 2 different states, for a long time, 2 teams in 2 different divisions, but has had recruiting wars that have gone public, has had coaches be served papers by the other school through the NCAA. We know what Philip Fulmer and that whole mess caused. We know a lot of the different things that have taken place to take this rivalry to the next level. And there is pure, unadulterated hatred within these 2 fan bases. And that is going to put you towards the top of my list no matter what. Back to the fact that we have had massive players, massive names, all-time great names in the history of the sport be a part of this rivalry and this game. Yes, it was played at Legion Field for a while. I saw Schuler and David Palmer go back and forth at Legion Field for a tie when it looked like Tennessee was going to be able to, or Alabama was going to be able to end the streak. So we've seen greatness in this game from individual players, from teams. We've seen upsets in this game. We've seen things off the field take this game to the next level. And while there are a lot of you folks out there that try to get cute and get your Twitter clout by saying that Tennessee is Alabama's biggest rival, I will respect the fact that it is a massive rivalry. But that statement before that is not going to be allowed by me and shouldn't be allowed by anyone. If it's your personal most hated team that Alabama plays because you live in Jackson, Tennessee, or you live in Knoxville, or you live in Nashville, whatever, that's fine for you. That individually doesn't make it the biggest rival on the schedule. I'm sorry, but that's just the way that it is. But I will have the understanding that this game has great meaning. There have been championships on the line. There have been things off the field that have taken it to new heights, and there have been reasons for these 2 fan bases to hate one another for a long time. So there are a lot of aspects of this game that make it special. Didn't start out that way. Tennessee didn't score in the first 8 of these 10 meetings of these 2 football teams. So it's one that has gone on forever. 1901 was the first game played in Birmingham, 6-6. Victory cigar is another thing that you think about when it comes down to this game. But this is one that I think deserves to be here, has all of the accreditation from all the different aspects of why one fan base would hate the other, 2 quality teams going at it, different things on the line, and it's just special. It's one that when you mention it by its slogan, people know exactly who it is, what it is, and what it's going to be all about. So that would take us then to number 3, which I realize it's odd that we move into a new Southeastern Conference with all the pageantry, all the tradition, and all the history of what this conference has been all about for such a long time. And we have 2 of the new teams that already have 2 of the top 5 rivalries in this league. But one thing that rivalries do have often that can sort of help take them to the next level is that pettiness that we all love to see, and we all hate to feel it sort of be derived inside of our chest. Because it's something that you just can't help sometimes when that hatred begins to creep out, and maybe you need to compliment somebody else from the other side, or have to swallow your pride and admit that that team was better than you that year. And no rivalry better describes that than Texas and Texas A&M. One that we haven't had since 2011, but one that's just that damn good that it's going to be on my list, and not just be on my list, but be number 3 on my list. 2 teams in the same state that have similar hatred for one another. One pretends not to hate the other team, which is the epitome of being petty in a rivalry setting. The other does things just to sort of elbow, nudge, or egg on their rival that they know they can't do, which, or I guess I should say couldn't do, but now can. And that is flash SEC logos around and putting their colors on SEC logos in different places. There are different things that come along with this game that make it special. 76, 37, and 5. I understand that Texas has dominated this game through the majority of it. Texas has won 10 of the last 15, but keep in mind also, we haven't seen it since 2011. I feel like Texas A&M is a little bit of a different program now than what we saw towards the tail end of this rivalry. Texas did win 10 straight at one point. A&M won 6 straight at one point. The first game was in 1894. These two teams mention each other in their fight songs. That's how much hatred is derived from what it is. November 30th, 2024, we're going to get this game back. And by God, I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see this game played again because I loved watching it on Thanksgiving. It was a Thanksgiving night tradition for a long time. And I just knew that there were going to be big players step up, make big plays. We were going to remember them forever. We just were. Whether it was a McCoy or whoever was stepping up and doing big things, this game had extra meaning, was going to be something special. Now, whether it's the Aggie Bonfire or the Hex Rally or whatever it is, there's also other things that are derived around this rivalry that make it even more special than just two teams facing off against one another. But you get this game at their home stadiums, and you have two teams from the same state, which always is going to bring extra hate. And I feel like when you have two fan bases that view themselves in two very different places, it only feeds the fuel to the fire that is a rivalry game. And this game has it almost perfectly. Maybe not as perfectly as the next game on our list, which would be the number 2 rivalry in the Southeastern Conference that we are heading into here in about a month. And that would be the Egg Bowl. Now, I'll go back and say I haven't been to Texas A&M. Never been to one of those games. Never been a part of that game. Have been to the Egg Bowl, though, and I know all about Blue Delta Jeans, and my friends at Blue Delta Jeans, Nick and the guys right there in Oxford, they love the Egg Bowl. They'd have this number 1, no doubt about it. If you need premium denim, if you need custom-fitted denim, and they can do it digitally now, BlueDeltaJeans.com, Father's Day right around the corner, gift card coming up. Maybe you're sending your kid off to college. Get them a fresh pair of Blue Delta jeans. They're not going to want another pair. Dress them up, casual. They're flexible. They're breathable for this time of year. That's huge. And now they have different style pants as well, not just denim that you can get at Blue Delta Jeans. They have a little sneaker deal going on right now. Go check them out on Instagram and see what's going on with that. BlueDeltaJeans.com. Tell them you heard about them right here on Cube Show. They are the absolute best. I had a chance to do 2 Egg Bowls, one during COVID. I'm not even going to count that one. It was earlier in the year, half full stadium. It just wasn't it. But I did it last year on Thanksgiving night, and by God, it lived up to every bit of the hype humanly possible. You have 2 fan bases that are just inherently different, and that's okay, because that's what makes those schools great. What one thinks they are, believes that they are, or the way that they act versus the other, and those two being basically is about as polar opposite as you can be with 2 institutions in the state of Mississippi, makes it amazing. This is won 65, 47, and 6. Mississippi State has won 8 of the last 15. I think that will probably surprise some people, the Mississippi State success in this game. Now, Mississippi State won 3 in a row. Ole Miss back-to-back twice in the last 15. So this thing has been about as back and forth as a big rivalry game is going to be. And I think that only makes it even better. Battle for the Golden Egg, we know that. 1901 was the first game. They've played every year since 1944. 1927 is when that Golden Egg trophy was first introduced and given to the winner of this game. There was a period of time probably from, I would say, like 2015, 16-ish, up until like 1920-ish, maybe even 21-ish, when this was one of the ugliest football games that I saw on an annual basis. I'm talking just flat out dirty. I don't know another way to describe it. And I think it was because of the literal hate that was brought up on an annual basis with these 2 fan bases, the individual players on this team, a heavy allotment of in-state players on both rosters, some of the things that went back and forth between the coaching staffs. We know some of the NCAA stuff that took place. It was gasoline just being dumped on the bonfire that is this rivalry. And they just continued to blow torch it over and over and over for a couple of years. And it was fun to watch, but it was also kind of like a little bit cringeworthy because you knew a lot of the things that were happening shouldn't be taking place. But it's one that I had an absolute blast being able to be a part of and see. I've always loved to watch. I am bummed it's not going to be on Thanksgiving anymore. But, this is 23 times they've met on Thanksgiving. And you go back and look at some of the famous games, whether it was the Wind Bowl, obviously the Egg Brawl, the Fire Hydrant game with Elijah Moore. We've seen good coaches get fired for losing this game. And I think that's just another thing that helps raise the meaning of this game. Now, when you want to talk meaning of a game, one thing that I always look at is when bigger things are not on the line, does it maintain that meaning? And that's where I think this game elevates. Now, we've had a lot of conversations about Ole Miss this year and potentially being in the playoff, making some kind of a run. Both these teams have been high in the college football playoff rankings previously, even though they didn't make it. But this game has been ultimately the biggest thing on the line for a lot of years in the last 20, 30 years. And that's not a put down. It's not a slight. It's just a lot of times there's not national or conference championship implications. So this becomes where the bragging rights are. This becomes the leaning point in which you will throw in your opposite fan base's face for 365 days. And I love that because it makes it special and it makes it great. This is just a lot of people that don't like each other. And this is a lot of people that want to beat the other team for a lot of different reasons. It makes it a rivalry. I mean, when we think about just kind of like that word and we look at just, what it means. If you went and looked at like synonyms for rivalry, antagonism, clash, conflict, contest, duel, encounter, matchup, jealousy, fight, strife, struggle, tug of war, bout, opposition, like all of those things come into play here, like all of them. When you just go look at it and you think about it that way. And those words are like, that's kind of what I think about when I think who's going to be towards the top of this list and who's not. By the way, definition of rivalry, competition for the same objective or for superiority in the same field. I think that superiority part of that definition is huge in some of these games that we're talking about because it's in that state, it's in that division, it's in that conference. A lot of different things where superiority is important come into play if your rivalry is going to be towards the top of the list. And I don't think it's a big secret where I'm going to go with number one. I've played in this game in 3 different locations. I played in Auburn, in Tuscaloosa, and in Birmingham, Alabama. Now, there are people, morons, who will tell you that it shouldn't be called the Iron Bowl anymore because it's not played in Birmingham. But it is a big portion of how the game got its name. But why would you strip the name of the game? Because that's what it has become. And it's taken on a totally different meaning, even past being played here in Birmingham based on what it is. But that last game at Legion Field for me was special because that's where I went to games as a kid. The Upper Deck said football capital of the South. And that's exactly what that was to me. But when we got it in Auburn, that was something special. I've told a story about having my children at the Iron Bowl last year and how special that was. We played at the first one in Tuscaloosa in over 100 years. And that was, it was 9-0. We didn't play fantastic football, but it's one of the most memorable games I've ever played in. 27 degrees, sleeting. It was incredible. Damon Duval, a couple field goals, we'll take it. We got out of there. We won the West and went to the SEC championship game. But I grew up around this game with a little bit of a different view. And I'll be the first one to admit this is my list. And my relation to a lot of these games is a big reason as to why they are where they are. 1, 4, 5, 3, 2, whatever. I know this one better than any of the other ones. But I didn't grow up an Auburn or an Alabama fan. So I got to see it sort of from both sides. I can remember probably middle school, we would go to Legion Field and just walk around the tailgates for this game. We did it for a couple others at times, but this is one we always wanted to. We'd put 50 cents in the Max bus. We'd ride down there, walk around. We'd always bump into our friends' parents. They'd give us a Coke or whatever, some chips, and we would just walk around. We just wanted to witness it. And the aroma of barbecue and the guys waving their towels to park your cars in their lot. and just how jam-packed everything was. People yelling at each other. Like, you felt the venom and the hatred in the parking lots walking into the stadium. Like, it was just unbelievable. And we know about all the things that have happened publicly because of this game. Politics, legislature has been involved in this game. Land grants have been involved in this game. Trees have been poisoned because of this game. Divorces have happened because of this game. There is a laundry list of personal reasons, family reasons, through relationships I have, friends that I have, that I could give you as to just why this game is extra. But two teams that play in the same state that doesn't really have big time professional sports elevates it to somewhere different, in my opinion. Now, we could have said the same thing about the Egg Bowl, but now we bring into where these two teams have been in the last 20, 30 years, multiple times playing for a spot in the national championship hunt, a couple times playing where both teams potentially were going to be in that hunt. And there are certain games that you can mention, like punt, Bama punt, bow over the top, run in the mud, cam back, kick six, 4th and 31. And nobody has to ask the teams involved. Nobody has to ask who won. Nobody has to ask who made the play, because you just know. It's pure hatred. It is 365 days of bragging rights. It is two teams not only in the same state, not only in close proximity, but in the same division of the same conference for a very long time. There is just a lot on the line. And the thought of ruining that other team's season, or it being sort of the hallmark of your season, has always been enough. Always. Then you bring in a division championship, a potential conference championship, or a national championship, and the stakes are raised even more. And the fact that it has been both teams that have had that on the line, and I'm not dumb enough to sit here and try to think that Alabama hasn't had that a lot more. I'm fully aware of that. I get that. I understand it. But how the fact that both have, realistically, multiple times played for and won a national championship, and other times, if would have won this game, potentially would have continued to be in the national championship hunt, has taken it to completely new heights. The eyeballs on this game for the things that have happened and what has been going on. And I also think that this game has been elevated a little bit more because the greatest football coach in college history has been a part of it for the last 15 years. Not going to be this year, but has been. Coach Saban elevated this game to a certain extent. I'm not going to tell you that the Foy ODK trophy or giving it away at halftime of a basketball game is something that's really cool or makes it special. But I will tell you it's something that every one of these two fan bases talk about almost every day. I do a radio show in Birmingham. I know what it means. I know what it's about. And I know what people want out of it. And I know what it does, more importantly, when you lose it. I had to leave 2 feet from the sideline when Isaiah Bond caught that football and turn around and walk back to an equipment cart that at the time my 8-year-old daughter was standing on, ugly crying, and wanting me to console her and asking me, sitting there, ugly crying, saying, "You said I would never forget this day for the rest of my life," which she won't, hopefully because it was her first Auburn game with her dad, but it might be because of what happened over the course of that game. But the competitive nature of that game also goes to show you just kind of what it was and what it's all been all about. 50-37-1. Alabama leads the series. Alabama did win 9 straight. Auburn has won 6 straight. Alabama has won 9 of the last 15. 6 of the last 15 have been by 1 score or less. Just keep that in mind. The competitive nature of this game has also helped make it special. There are two, when I think about this game, it was in Birmingham until 1989. And I know it's sort of changed the dynamic a little bit, but being at these two home stadiums, traditionally what these two teams have meant to college football, two teams that are in the top 13 in wins all time in the history of college football. And for it to be where it has been in the season and for what has been on the line the last 20 years, it's a pretty damn special rivalry and a pretty damn special game. So the comments are going to be open here. I can't wait to see what you guys have to say. I understand that Georgia, Florida was not on this list. I think it's a cool game. I don't think it's a great setting stadium-wise, but I do think what goes on around it is also pretty cool. I think the fact that Florida was dominant for a while, Georgia has been dominant recently helps a lot. I mean, hell, the amount of great players that have been a part of that game. But we could also look at other games like Alabama, LSU. We could look at games. I mean, there are other games that are played for trophies, like LSU, Arkansas plays for like a 500-pound boot, right? That's there. We could look at the fact that, LSU rotates these rivalries on almost 3 or 4 year basis, whether it's Florida and, games being moved or throwing shoes at people, or Alabama game of the century or game of the galaxy, whatever it was, and playing again in the national championship game, or, now, they have I think they have a trophy with a flower on it when they play Ole Miss. Like, I mean, you got a lot of them. Georgia kind of the same way. Georgia, Tennessee has been great for a while. Georgia Tech, clean old fashioned hate. I mean, that thing's pretty badass in and of itself. But also, you could look at Florida, Tennessee for at one point in time, maybe at close to a decade, was probably the best game annually in this league in the mid to late 90s. I mean, that was a freaking Super Bowl every year. So my list is not etched in stone. This is what it is right now. There are some that have carried over a little bit because of the past. Some I might be projecting a little bit more of. Some that I have a little bit more of an emotional tie to. But none of you are going to be wrong. And if you want to give me your top 5, I would love to see it, love to hear it, love to hear which part of mine maybe you just don't like. Let me know that. Please subscribe on YouTube. We're right there knocking on the door of 10,000 subscribers. We would love to get there. Apple iTunes podcast, if you want to listen there. You can also go find us on Spotify. But we appreciate you being a part of the show, listening to the show. When I heard this come out and I began to have this debate in some other places, I had to do it here to see what everybody else was going to say, and I wanted to share my list with you. So we'll be back next week with another spring review. And we owe you another show in between. I think I have an idea what that is. UFL over this weekend. So we'll be back to normal after that. Please tune in again next week, and we appreciate it.